Let's move to this now. The SANDF is investigating the incident, in fact, the circumstances that led to the incident that killed two South African National Defence Force members in the Democratic Republic of Congo on Thursday. Now, it's believed that one of the members shot and killed his colleague with their service weapon before turning it on himself. And the SANDF saying that it has convened a board of inquiry to look into this particular incident as well as the circumstances in that regard to understand exactly what happened here. Let's speak to Darren Olivier, African Defence Review Director. Thank you so much for your time, Darren. We speak again, and once again, it's simply not great circumstances, especially given what we were talking about a few weeks ago. Your reaction now to the latest deaths?
Yeah, good evening. So obviously this is a very tragic outcome. It shows that these personnel are under severe pressure. Anytime you have this kind of event, which is a murder-suicide, it's a sign that something in the process has broken. Now, troops do deploy with access to mental health care. They are given some screening ahead of time. But we need to ask the question is, if that's enough or what went wrong, and that's what the Board of Inquiry is for. I think one of the things we're probably going to find is that these are very long deployments. Members are away between 12 and 14 months. And in that time, in a very, very tense and stressful and, I think, difficult situation, people can have mental health crises, which unfortunately occasionally get this bad. But I definitely think that, yes, the Board of Inquiry must get to the bottom of how it got to this point and how this wasn't spotted beforehand.
Yeah, and you ask one very critical question there, that is it enough? Is the support that has been meted out enough? And of course, we talk about this while the Board of Inquiry is still going to investigate. But in your reading of the situation and what you've done as research over time when it comes to the SANDF, is it enough?
I think it's a good question. I think they've tried to make it enough. Like I said, there are psychologists and social workers deployed as part of the South African Military Health Service. And but I think at some point, the SANDF has too few personnel. And if you're going to be deploying, for example, this mission to the DRC, 12 months at a time, over and over and over again over the past 20 years and presumably years in the future, it's very, very difficult to avoid mental health crises, given the sheer pace of deployments. In many countries, they try to restrict the number of times a person will deploy to a foreign deployment to around, one every, at most, 3 years, but ideally 4 to 5 to 6 years. In SANDF, that can be much shorter. It can be every second or third year because of just the sheer shortage of personnel. And I think given those repeated deployments and given how long they're away for, you're going to have this issue. In my mind, the answer is not necessarily that just throw in more, therapists, because that isn't part of the answer. It's to actually look at the question of, well, are we over deploying our troops?
And are we?
Yes, we are.
So
the SANDF does not have enough troops to be deployed on all the missions we currently have.
Should we then be looking at scaling down some of the ambitions then?
Yes, absolutely. I've said this many times, the SANDF's budget's been cut dramatically over the past 10 to 15 years. At the same time, the number of personnel has reduced from a high of about 75,000, if you include civilians, down to, I think, 68,000 at the moment. Again, they include civilians. So there's fewer people doing, more work, and that really can't be sustained. So I think it is time for us as a country to recognize the fact that, well, the SANDF is smaller, less capable than it was before, so we have to cut our ambition.
And this comes, of course, at the time as, the SANDF is still reeling from the deaths of the members that you and I spoke about a few weeks ago. How devastating is this likely to be for those who are part of this mission currently?
I think it'll definitely be a hit to morale, but I don't believe it will be devastating. Members are fully aware, I think, of the mental health issues and will certainly be affected by it. But they are, in general, very mission-oriented as well. And I think they would have the mindset where they'll want to get up and keep moving on. I think you'll already start seeing the effects of this, in a few months' time as this really starts getting absorbed by people and they start to feel more pressure in the operational area.
Does it further heighten the concerns that you've had before of this particular operation then?
Well, in this case, the individuals weren't part of the new operation, which is DRC. They're part of the existing deployment with the UN peacekeeping force, which itself is going to wind down. So in that case, not necessarily, but absolutely this is a factor, especially as members of the new deployment get into an environment where they are going to be up against potentially a lot more action, a much more intense environment. And quite a few of them might come over from the UN mission when that winds down, which means that there might even be an even longer period in country. So while I'd be very hesitant and cautious to extend too much from this incident, I think it is definitely cause for worry and cause for a bit of a rethink.
All right, Darren, thank you so much for that. And certainly let's see then, what this inquiry does reveal and what happens, as you say, of the more support that is needed on the ground and the number of personnel. Budget issues have been of a great concern as far as the SANDF over time. And we've seen various reports even of the impact that, the budgetary constraints have had on some of its work as well. But thank you so much for chatting to us this evening. Do appreciate your insights. That was Darren Olivier, African Defence Review Director.